What's up guys, Pweebs here. I know for the last few videos I've been doing a lot of drafting, and I know I've been kind of planning on doing all the classes at least once in the series so that you can kind of get a grasp for how they all play. And I've been doing a lot of commentary as of late, and I'm pretty sure all of my videos have included some kind of commentary thus far, but this time I'd like to take it in a slightly different direction. A lot of people have been asking me, how do you build? And that's kind of a hard question to answer per se because everyone has their own opinions. And personally, I believe this to be true. Like, you can't feel constrained to any one option. So basically, when you're crafting a build, like people will often say that there's like this one meta build that's really viable and it's the only thing that is worth taking. Like a lot of people while leveling will always run a Zerker build, and that's great and all. You're gonna clear really fast, and that's commendable. But a lot of times you're gonna need something different, especially when you hit 80 and you start doing high-end dungeons and fractals and start doing world versus worlds, standardized PvP, all that fancy stuff. You're gonna have to start modifying, and you can't be that berserker anymore. Otherwise, you're gonna get wasted, quite frankly. So this build, I felt that this needed to get out because so many people have been asking me how to build properly and how to adapt to like various playstyles. And this video will be explaining my personal view on the principles of build crafting, and hopefully this will help you devise your own builds for your own games. Now, first of all, I'd like to quote a YouTuber that I have watched quite frequently. You may know him. His channel is known as I Am One, I Am Legion. That's He's not by any means like a super popular channel, but feel free to check him out. Anyways, he has two basic principles that apply that encompass his whole build, sort of. Like whenever he crafts a build, he keeps these two things in mind, and I like to keep these in mind as well. The first being, never invest into something that you don't use, and never sacrifice your team's advantages for your own gain. So if you were to get don't the thing behind that is pretty much don't go for selfish traits. Like if you're working in a team, you should never have selfish traits that only benefit you. Moving on, my own personal principles are that first of all, it needs to be fun. You can't play a build just because other people want you to. It needs to be not only effective but also enjoyable. Now, that isn't to say that it should be so enjoyable that it's a complete random pile of crap that you think is funny. Put it together. You can't expect to do very well. And the thing behind that is that you want to strike a balance between good traits and traits that fit your own personal style of play, because you can't lock yourself down. You need to be prepared to change and adapt to the situation at hand. Now, the build I have currently laid out is a warrior build. I'm in World versus World as of now, so this reflects my own personal playstyle in World versus World. When you get in, you need to focus on a few things, and aside from those principles, there are also two or three little questions you should ask yourself. First of all, what's your own playstyle as a person? Do you see yourself doing damage, or do you want to tank? Do you want to support? And I know in Guild Wars 2 there is no holy trinity per se, like in most MMOs. There's no tank, healer, and deeps. Instead, all classes are self-sufficient to a certain degree and can fulfill any of those roles with varying levels of success. Now, on the warrior, I still think it's the best to go tanky, bruiserish sort of build because warriors have the highest base health in the game, and they have the highest base toughness on par with the Guardian, and they already have pretty high base stats, so a lot of people will say that it is completely viable to run full damage, and this is probably true in most PvE content. But in standardized PvP, World versus World, Edge of the Mists, all that cool stuff, you're not going to get very far, which is what I told earlier. So when you start investing in the traits and you start thinking about what you want to do, know that you're going to have to invest at least a little bit into the defensive lines. Don't try not to base your trait choices entirely on the stats. I want to do damage. I'm not a full tank, but I'm not investing into the damage tree all that much because I feel the traits that fit my playstyle the most are located in the bottom trees, the defensive support trees. When you start setting up your traits, you want to divide them into 2 or 3 basic groups, but the third being optional. But the 2 groups that I like to run often, like in terms of mental separation, I suppose you could say, are traits you need to have and traits that are situationally good. And now what I mean by situational is that they won't always be the most amazing trait for a setup. Like, for example, let's see here. Crack shot. Rifle and harpoon gun shots. Pierce reduces recharge on rifle and harpoon skills. This is great and all, but only if you're using a rifle. And most warrior builds at the moment don't. And that isn't to say you can't use a rifle. I don't mean to dissuade any of you from taking a weapon slot that's not normal. I guess you could say, don't quote me on that, normal, but try not to, like, this is a situational trait in that you shouldn't invest into crack shot if you're not using a rifle. Like, if you unequip a rifle, you should just take off this trait and replace it with something that actually helps you. And the essential traits are just that. They're essential. You need them in order to do this in order to fulfill the build's purpose properly. Now, these essential traits should fit the playstyle that you want to reflect in your build. For example, I like running a bulky bruiser sort of build that manages to churn out some damage while maintaining significant bulk and condition removal. To meet these ends, I've run a kind of a primarily defensive build, investing a lot into tactics, because I run a shout build. Now, shouts are, I don't mean to turn this into a fully warrior guide, but this will kind of help teach you about the synergy between traits and skills. Now, I run a shout build. As you can see here, all 3 of my utilities are shouts, and the warrior and guardian both actually have shouts, but the warrior's shouts are less about boon generation and they're more about the aggressive aspect of combat. Like, this will give you fury and might, heals you and removes conditions so that you can keep moving quicker and you can maintain your stacks of boon duration in PvP. And I know that's kind of a weird explanation, but there are some skills which can convert conditions into boons and vice versa. So, like, if a necromancer drops Well of Corruption on you, you can just shake it off. And finally, on my mark, which is a vulnerability proc, insane vulnerability. For 11 seconds, they take 10% increased damage, and with a Zerg of 20 plus people, you're doing a good 200% increased damage on a person, assuming they're all hitting that one target. Excuse me. Anyways, back to the traits. In order to further the ends of this shout build, I'm running a full shout setup. See, lung capacity reduces recharge on shouts. The synergy there is pretty much unmistakable. You can't go wrong with shout recharge reduction on shouts. The more shouts you can have, the more boons you can hand out, the more vulnerability you can dish. And based on this Grandmaster trait, the more you can heal because of this trait, which heals you for 1.6k every time you affect someone with a shout. They are also healed for that much, and it's really, really strong. You can already begin to see how this build will work with the rapid shout rotation. Now, this one is also kind of situational. The quick breathing reduces recharge on Warhorn skills. Warhorn skills convert conditions into boons. Now, I am currently running Sword Warhorn, and Warhorn is kind of a versatile sort of weapon. The Warhorn's 2 skills: charge, grant swiftness to yourself and allies while carrying chilled, crippled, and immobilized. Now, this is amazing, especially with that reduction trait, because if you grant swiftness is very good for roaming in world versus world. If you can shout into your Warhorn, like use charge, everyone around you will immediately get faster for 13 seconds. Because of the recharge reduction trait, which I have taken for this particular build, it has a 12-second cooldown. So assuming you pop charge every time it's off cooldown, you can maintain permanent swiftness. Now, in the middle of a fight, you can also pop charge to cure any of these three conditions: crippled, immobilized, and chilled. And because of the quick breathing trait, one condition on the targets on each target afflicted by this charge skill have one condition converted to a boon. Due to the prevalence of conditions in PvP especially, this is amazing. It's literally godly. Like, combined with all the condition removal in this build, you will not be they literally can't stop you unless they directly burst you down without. Like, you can ignore pretty much 20 conditions in one go if you pop all your condition removal at once. So just keep that in mind if you ever decide to go this particular build. You've got a lot of tankiness on you. Anyways, Call to Arms grant Vigor while weakening nearby foes. Same deal here. Vigor allows you to dodge more. Weakness on enemies pretty much allows them to dodge less, and it makes their weapons have a chance to deal 50% reduced damage. Really good for large-to-go combat. If they can't dodge, they can't avoid AoE, which means you're supporting your team directly, which ties into the build principles from earlier that stated never take a trait at the cost of your team's disadvantage. You always want to be looking for team buffs, especially in PvP sort of play where you have to work as a team. Things like this are absolutely essential for your build. Going back to this trait line and how I said I don't generally invest heavily into damage, this is a very, very situational trait. And I know I've been talking about this a lot. Oh, World versus World is shutting down and prepare for a new build. You will be redirected to Lion's Arch. Well, that's great. Anyways, on to my trait. This is a kind of a situational sort of deal, and it's not amazing per se, but in World versus World it's actually quite useful. Death from above. When you fall... Whoa, what just happened? Oh gosh. Okay, so there was a new build right in the middle of my video. That's so awkward. And I know you guys have probably had this happen to you. You're in the middle of something really important and just suddenly it shuts off. Gets the new build set up. And where was I? Yeah, Death from Above. Death from Above is a very, like I said, a situational trait because it's only useful for very specific situations. And most of these situations actually come up quite often in World versus World. Now, the reason I believe it to be so useful in World versus World is due to the rapid falling damage that you will manage to gather up over your roaming. And this will occur in I'd say 2 or 3 various scenarios. The first one being you're defending a keep and you need to get aggressive on the enemy, and the only way you can get aggressive on them quickly enough before they can run away is by jumping down. You not only take 50% reduced damage by falling, which is amazing in and of itself for this situation, because then you won't die by jumping off the wall, but you deal AoE damage around you and knock down people, allowing you to initiate for your less bulky teammates and allowing them to follow up, I suppose, on what you're trying to do. Furthermore, not only can you do this to defend, you can also do this for a really funny troll bait, where you jump off a really high cliff, you take 50% reduced damage. So say you survive with 50% HP. Like, the fall would normally kill you, like outright kill you, but due to the fact that you have that Death from Above trait, you take 50% reduced damage, right? Still with me? Anyways, you hit the ground, get 50% HP. So a lot of times, especially with the, I don't want to be rude here, but especially with some of the more noobish Guild Wars 2 World versus World players, they will immediately assume that since you survived, they will too. They will jump, and they will die. And you will just walk away. So basically, the point I'm trying to get to is that the principles of build crafting aren't really rules or limitations, but they're guidelines that you should strive to follow whenever building. Earlier in my previous draft building videos, you've seen me kind of go through the logic behind my build in my head, and you've heard me talk about like how my various traits synergize with one another. And this is the synergy that you should be looking for in your own builds. And they should all fit together in a way. And I feel like a lot of people will say that weapon skills are the most important, but I agree and disagree because like a lot of weapon skills can dictate how you will play. Like I currently play a hammer and then sword warhorn combo build, and sure I like building around the hammer, and like my quick breathing trait is obviously built around the warhorn, but that doesn't mean you should entirely base your traits off weapons. And I honestly and wholeheartedly believe that it should revolve around the playstyle and in the end really what you enjoy the most, because it's really a toss-up. Like, do you want to play an effective build that you hate playing, or do you want to play a build that not only does okay on its own, but it's something that you enjoy, like genuinely enjoy doing, you know? So anyways, I hope you enjoyed this kind of informative video. I know I'm really not used to it, so a lot of rambling may or may not have just happened, but I hope you learned something, and have an amazing day.